The Sunday on Memorial Day weekend is usually billed as the greatest day in motorsports. You got Monaco for Formula One fans, the Indianapolis 500, the largest sports event in the country, and then of course the Coca-Cola 600, NASCAR's longest event at its home racetrack. Unfortunately this year, with the pandemic obviously, Indianapolis, Monaco both canceled or postponed. The Coke 600 was the only major motorsport left to kind of hold up the title, hold up the mantle. And my goodness, this whole race just left a bad taste in my mouth, I feel like. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the winner. We're going to talk about the finish. We're going to talk about some of the controversial decisions that some of the top teams made. We're going to talk a little bit about everything. But this race, blah. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. As seen on TV, as a matter of fact, if you watched Fox Sports 1's 100,000 cameras that aired earlier today for that first race back at Darlington, your boy was featured on it a couple times. Got Out of the Groove, a nice little plug. That was pretty cool to see, so shout out to FS1 for reaching out and letting me be a part of that awesome thing. It was cool to see so many fans, and even other people I knew featured in that little mini documentary video episode, so that was really cool. But anyway, we aren't talking about that. We're talking about the race tonight that ended just a few minutes ago. It's early Monday morning now. Happy Memorial Day, I suppose. Of course, a very patriotic day, a very solemn day, but also a very patriotic NASCAR race day. Everyone racing in remembrance of all of the fallen soldiers and men and women of our armed forces. So always a great spectacle. NASCAR, of course, once again pulled out all the stops as best they could with there not being any fans in attendance. Kind of had to simplify their pre-race and mid-race festivities and gestures this year, but still really cool, and love to see all the patriotic paint schemes this year. I feel like we had more this year than usual. I think like all the Rick Ware cars had some sort of patriotic flair to them. Really, almost every car in the field, it looked like, had some sort of red, white, and blue theme. But the paint schemes, the moment, all of the great ceremonial aspects of this thing were on point as per usual. But the race tonight left a little bit to be desired. So this video is going to be a little bit different. It's really late. I don't feel like staying up for 2 hours to edit this thing. So I'm going to kind of just talk in this episode a little bit more. But we're going to talk about the race a little bit as a whole. We're going to talk about the rules package and why this year's Coke 600 was way worse than last year's Coke 600, despite being the same rules package. We're going to talk about that finish, and we're going to talk about some of the top finishers and most notable storylines from today's race. We're going to touch on a lot of bases, but I'm going to kind of, usually I do a lot of jump cuts in this video in these styles of episodes. I'm not going to do that as much today. It's going to be a little bit more stream of consciousness, you might say. Let's start by talking about the race. I have never seen a NASCAR Cup Series race where clean air mattered more than what I saw tonight. Now, clean air with this current high downforce rules package at certain tracks has become extremely important. At other tracks, it's not any more important than it ever has been. The important factor here is that clean air, pretty much in every rules package that I've been alive to see at least, clean air has mattered. Clean air has often presented at least a small advantage. That being said, tonight's race at Charlotte, clean air was a huge advantage. There was one restart, I think in stage 3, maybe early stage 4. I don't remember who exactly it was who stayed out, but 3 cars stayed out after a row of pit stops, after a set of pit stops. The guy who restarted first ran off and led for like 40 laps. The people who restarted second and third were outside the top 20 within like 15 laps of the restart. So just because they lost that clean air, they dropped like rocks. But then the same driver, on the same set of tires, same level of tires and everything like that, drove off and led for a good portion of the race. So clean air mattered so heavily tonight, and that right there made it kind of hard to watch. This was a race where the field got strung out. Leader, we only saw maybe 1 or 2 green flag passes for the lead, and at least one of them, I remember it was mainly due to a lap car getting in the leader's way and messing up their momentum. With this rules package, it's very much a momentum race, but I was extremely disappointed by that factor tonight, by the racing in general. There are a few factors at play here, perhaps. Obviously, the rules package is still very polarizing, but this is the exact same rules package that was run last year for the All-Star race in the Coke 600, and the All-Star race in Coke 600 last year were bangers, y'all. They were fun. They were great racing. The All-Star race last year received nearly unanimously positive reviews. The Coke 600 was a pleasant and welcome surprise, given, past years it's just been Truex dominating half the time, and people were kind of getting tired of that. Last year's Coke 600 was a pretty darn good race. I was shocked that this year's race didn't have that. But there are potentially a few factors. The rules package was exactly the same. So I saw a lot of people, of course, on social media pointing to the high downforce rules package and kind of stopping there as if that was the one and only problem that affected tonight's race. I don't think the rules package was the culprit really at all. Obviously, the rules package is a factor. It's a factor at every racetrack. But again, last year, with the same rules package, presented some pretty awesome racing. They showed some clips during the race. 4 wide. We had 4 wide racing last year. We didn't ever come close to that in tonight's race. So a few other factors. There was the PJ1 added to the outside lane. There was some PJ1, VHT, whatever you want to call it, last year, but perhaps this year it had a different effect, and possibly that's due to the rain that passed through. Of course, this race was under the red flag for about an hour due to rain, so we had a very green racetrack, which is another difference from last year. Last year, you had the Xfinity race, the truck race, it all put rubber down before the Cup race. Tonight, it was a very, very green racetrack. In fact, this race is the first race in what's going to be a pretty busy week here the next few days at Charlotte Motor Speedway, so very little rubber laid down, so that was definitely a factor. But the main factor, I believe, that not enough people were talking about, but I saw Cole Pern, who's not a crew chief anymore, but obviously was Truex's crew chief for many years. He was commenting on this. I saw a few other reporters confirm it. They brought a different tire to the race this year than what they had at Charlotte a year ago. I'm not entirely sure if it was all 4 tires. At first I thought it was, but then I saw some reports from a few different NASCAR reporters that said no, it was just the left side tires that were different. But either way, a different type of tire, different hardness. I'm not sure if it was a harder tire this year. Whatever tire it was, it did not wear as much as I believe last year's tires at Charlotte Motor Speedway did, and that was really a problem. That's a significant difference in the way these cars are going to handle and ultimately how the race is going to play out. So a lot of people, of course, just blaming the package and stopping there because that's the easy boogeyman to blame. Just point to the package. See, NASCAR, we told you all along, high downforce doesn't work. But I will reiterate, this is the exact same rules package that was run a year ago in what was a very entertaining Coca-Cola 600, and it's an aero package that has produced, I would say, across the board, better racing at the mile and a half than especially what we saw in 2018 with the extreme low downforce package where cars were so unstable they couldn't get side by side. I think obviously a perfect balance needs to be struck, which I think is what the next gen car set to debut in 2022 is going to present. I think it's going to be not a lot of horsepower, but I think it will have less downforce than the current rules package does on intermediate. So I think the next gen car will strike a decent balance that most people will be pleased with, but obviously that remains to be seen. But that being said, I don't think the rules package was the main culprit tonight. Obviously it's the baseline, but again, last year was great racing, this year was bad racing. I think you have to look at the tire, and I think you have to look at the extenuating external circumstances such as the weather and the lack of grip on the racetrack due to said weather as the number one reason why tonight's race was not fun. But that being said, tonight's race was not fun. It was not a good race, and it left a sour taste in my mouth, and I'm sure a lot of other folks' mouths, because of the way this thing finished as well. So this race wasn't super exciting, but it did have its moments down the stretch. Jimmie Johnson won the race off pit road with about 45 laps to go, and I thought with the way clean air had been so important and had proven to be so important all night long, it was Jimmie Johnson's race to lose. Unfortunately, he got a bad jump on the restart, lost the lead to Brad Keselowski, and Jimmy's chances of winning the race basically went out the window because it was very difficult to pass the leader unless you had a substantially faster car. Now, Chase Elliott did have a substantially faster car, and he did pass Brad Keselowski and looked like he was going to cruise to victory. It was going to be his first crown jewel victory. Well, the reason this is noteworthy: 1, his father Bill Elliott never won the Coca-Cola 600. 2, Chase Elliott is the most popular driver in NASCAR, whether people want to admit it or not. He is the most popular driver in NASCAR, at least on paper, and he has not yet won a crown jewel race in NASCAR, even though I would say his Roval win from last year, not technically a crown jewel, but that's a pretty memorable and impactful win in my opinion, just the circumstances around it and how he won that race. But needless to say, this was looking like his first crown jewel win, and with Chase Elliott, the guy who was supposed to be the heir apparent to Jeff Gordon, the guy who's supposed to carry NASCAR into the future as its next superstar, winning a crown jewel race. Very important, very impactful moment. And then with 2 to go, his teammate William Byron blows a left rear and wrecks, and we have a caution. And even though tires didn't matter a whole lot, and really clean air mattered more than anything, Chase Elliott and Alan Gustafson, mostly Alan Gustafson it sounds like, decided to pit the 9 car from the lead. And a lot of people on Twitter, of course, want to criticize Alan Gustafson for this. Of course, a lot of frustrated and disappointed Chase Elliott fans want to point the finger at anybody other than Chase Elliott. And yeah, it was Alan Gustafson's decision. Chase Elliott drove from 11th to 3rd on that final overtime restart. So Chase Elliott drove angry. He was on his game tonight at the end of this race. It was Alan Gustafson who made the call not to pit. But I will say, cut Alan Gustafson some slack. When you're leading the race with 2 to go in that situation, there really is no right answer. Think about what happened to Ryan Blaney at Vegas earlier this year. It was the same thing. He was damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. If he pits, everyone behind him stays out. If he doesn't pit, most everyone else pits behind him, and there's a good chance Blaney at Vegas would have been the only car out there with no tires. And tonight, if Chase Elliott stays out, very good chance most everyone behind him pits, and Chase is one of the only guys, maybe 1 or 2 others would stay out. I bet a couple would have tried it, which is why I personally was surprised to see Chase Elliott stayed out. But needless to say, there would have been guys on fresh tires close behind Chase Elliott, and there's no guarantee he would have held them off on that restart. I think clean air is important, but also getting a good launch on the restart, which is tough to do on old tires, is equally important, and we saw Jimmy Johnson get into trouble with that the restart prior. So people blaming Alan Gustafson as if it was an obvious decision to stay out there. I would pump the brakes there. It was not an obvious decision. Staying out could have very well cost him the win as well. That being said, I was a little surprised. I would have stayed out just given how important track position was for most everyone else who stayed out. Remember that example I pointed out earlier? I can't remember what driver it was, but 3 drivers stayed out, and the guy who restarted first drove off to the lead. The other 2 fell way back, showing how important clean air was tonight. Anyway, it sounded like Chase Elliott was extremely angry over the radio afterwards, hurling many expletives, not at anyone specifically, just kind of into the world. I don't blame him. This is 2 really tough weeks in a row for Chase Elliott. Hendrick Motorsports is cursed. Honestly, Chase Elliott's probably the one who's most cursed. After last week, looked like he might win that race at Darlington on Wednesday. At the very worst, he was going to finish second. Gets wrecked by Kyle Busch in one of the most weird accidents. I believe it was an accidental wrecks I've ever seen. That was horrible luck for Chase Elliott. And then this week, his own teammate, William Byron, blowing a tire and bringing out a caution with literally 2 laps to go and costing him a win. Hendrick Motorsports is cursed, man. Jimmy Johnson having a chance to run off with this thing and blowing the restart, losing out to Keselowski. Hendrick Motorsports, man, is cursed. I know Alex Bowman got that win at Auto Club earlier this year, but man, with the speed they've had, Chase Elliott was leading at, was it Vegas? When he slapped the wall at Vegas, when he was leading and cut a tire down? Hendrick Motorsports is cursed this year, y'all. Specifically Chase Elliott. He seems to be getting the worst of it right now. Alex Bowman was able to break through and get a win. Jimmy's had some good finishes, but Chase Elliott, man, should at least have 1, should probably have 2 wins by now, given how well he's run and where he's been at certain points in the race, but has not gotten those finishes. So, really hate to see it, but at the end of the day, if we look at those top finishers right there, Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson both end up with top 3 finishes. I have not even talked about the winner of tonight's race, Brad Keselowski. But let's talk about him for just a moment, shall we? This is what happens when I don't chop these videos up. Usually I'm able to check my notes and remind myself where I'm going. Now I'm doing it all off of memory, so it's a little different than usual. But Brad Keselowski got the win. This is his first Coke 600 win. A huge win for him for a number of reasons. One, he's always been very pro-military. He's very patriotic just naturally. And so winning on Memorial Day has to mean a lot to Brad Keselowski. It sure looked like it meant a lot to him in his post-race interview. Another reason is this is a contract year for Brad Keselowski. And I'll say, out of the gates, looked like Logano and even for a while there, Blaney, the other 2 Penske cars, seemed to be a little bit faster than him. I know Keselowski did not have the best car tonight and took advantage of circumstances for sure, but getting a win tonight has to feel really good if you're Brad Keselowski. And another important factor here is that this is very likely the last race we're going to see Miller Lite on the hood of a NASCAR Cup car, at least for a long time, at least for a while. Because Miller Lite has consistently dropped off their support the last couple years of Keselowski. This is the only race this year that they are the primary scheme on that 2 car. Isn't that crazy? Used to be iconic, man. 2012, Keselowski, almost every race was in the blue deuce. You know, the glowing blue and gold Miller Lite car. You know, that was iconic with Rusty Wallace before Keselowski. Just Miller Lite cars have been almost as important to NASCAR history, almost as iconic to NASCAR history as the rainbow scheme. Maybe not quite that iconic, but close. It's kind of in that second tier, just below the rainbow scheme. It's like if I was going to rank NASCAR paint schemes as far as like historical significance, it's like the Petty blue and the orange and red, the STP colors, the Dale Earnhardt, black car, the rainbow Jeff Gordon. Those are probably the top tier. But then that second tier, it's like, I would say the Kyle Busch M&Ms. I would say the Jeff Gordon Flames. I would say, in this case, the Brad Keselowski, or not necessarily Brad Keselowski, but the Rusty Wallace / Kurt Busch, the Miller Lite schemes, maybe the Wood Brothers Classic scheme with the way that 21 cars always kind of look the same, with the red and white. There's that kind of second tier of schemes, and I would put this right in there. So it's a little disappointing that this could be the last time we see Miller Lite on the hood of a NASCAR Cup Series car, at least for a while, but it is what it is. So an important win, a meaningful win for Brad Keselowski for a multitude of reasons. Could this help him possibly sign an extension with Penske? I still think he's leaving Penske at the end of this year, but winning this race continues to prove to any potential suitors out there that, hey, this guy's a race winner, he's a championship contender. So anyone like maybe Hendrick or SHR or whoever else might be looking in at Brad Keselowski here, they're going to have to pay top dollar if they want Brad Keselowski to come to their team, because he is still one of the top drivers in NASCAR, as if there's really any doubt. But, this race once again proves that he's at the top of his game. He beat Jimmy Johnson fair and square on equal tires on that second to last restart. That was impressive. Jimmy was the control car, and Keselowski got past him. So Brad Keselowski still got it. Important win for him. Cool to see. knowing what this race means to him. But I must say, I did kind of want a Hendrick Motorsports card when I was rooting for Chase Elliott to get that win, just, because I want him to start adding to his legacy. He's supposed to be the next big thing. He's supposed to be a perennial championship contender, a future Hall of Famer, perhaps. Again, like I said, he was billed when he came up as the next Jeff Gordon. He had the background, he had the talent. He was in the 24 car at first for Hendrick. He was a top prospect. That was the hype around Chase Elliott, and it took him a while to start living up to it, but he's now starting to live up to some of that hype. So I was really hoping he could get his first crown jewel victory here tonight. But when it became clear that he wasn't going to win it, I was hoping Jimmy Johnson could break that, 101 race winless streak, but close, but no cigar, man. Hendrick Motorsports should have 3 or 4 wins this year, the way they've run. The fact that they only have 1 win so far in the first, 7 races, I believe? Criminal. An absolute proves that they're cursed. Someone has cursed Hendrick Motorsports. Somewhere, somehow, they have done it. There's some bad vibes over that Chevy team right now because they should be getting better results than they are getting. And 2 of the top 3 positions is not a bad night, but they should have won this race tonight. The Chevys were class of the field outside of maybe Martin Truex Jr. for much of this race. I haven't even mentioned Martin Truex. That's what happens when I go off my notes. Truex led a lot of this race as well. So he almost won his, 3rd Coke 600 in 4 years, something like that. He's good at Charlotte. Watch out for Martin Truex Jr. But anyway, I guess they'll pack it up and do it again here in just a few days. Wednesday night is another NASCAR race at Charlotte here. Let's put this race on the Groovy Gauge because I want to talk about Wednesday night's race a little bit as well. Every race so far in 2020, including the iRacing races that I put on the Groovy Gauge, has been a positive. I think the only one I gave one of the Pro Invitational races, I think I gave Bristol a 50% on the Groovy Gauge just because it was such a crash fest. But other than that, every race, virtual or real life, has been a positive this year because, that's just the truth of it. NASCAR was on a roll, especially coming back out of this hiatus. That first race back at Darlington was a really entertaining race. A lot of interesting moments, memorable moments. The Wednesday night race had a dramatic finish and controversy at the end. Tonight's race, it was kind of a dud. They were due. NASCAR is due. You can't just have every race be a complete fire, just amazing competition. It can't be that way. If that happens every single race, then the special races won't feel special anymore. You need some duds. You expect some duds. And tonight was a pretty darn big dud. If I'm going to put this thing on the Groovy Gauge, I can't give it a positive score. I'm going to give tonight's Coke 600 a 30% on the Groovy Gauge. It's just so long, guys. I get that the Coke 600 is historic because it's a 600-mile race, and I'm not advocating that they change it, but my gosh, this is a long race. I know the rain delay added to it, but this thing got started. This thing, even with the rain delay, it was well over 4 hours long. If I subtract the rain delay, just the actual when it was green or yellow, it was 4.5 hours long. That's just a lot of racing. When the racing is really entertaining like it was for last year's Coke 600, I don't really mind it. I love NASCAR. I'd love to see more NASCAR. Why would I want less NASCAR? But tonight, with the fact that it was hard to pass, the leaders were getting away really easily. It was a track position game pretty much from start to finish. This was a dud. This was a boring race, so I have to give it a 30%. The length, of course, hurt it. I don't know, the conversation with some of these midweek races being shorter is going to shift to whether NASCAR should get rid of a lot of the 500-mile races going forward. I think that conversation we could talk about in a different video at some point. I think that's a very interesting debate to be had. But man, 600 miles. It's iconic. It's historic for a lot of reasons. I'm not advocating we change it, but whew, it was long. It was a long race. But looking ahead to Wednesday night, I hope NASCAR can do something. Maybe with Goodyear, maybe something can happen and they change up the tires, bring back the tires that they ran a year ago at Charlotte, because I don't want to watch, even though it's a much shorter race, I don't really want to watch another race like what we saw here tonight. Tonight's race was not super great. It got a little bit better as the night went on and the track added grip and the PJ1 sort of came in by the second half of this race. It got better, but still was not on the level as last year's races at Charlotte. So yeah, it was a tough one for sure. But yeah, I'll give it a 30%. It's a shame. NASCAR was on a good roll. Even the Xfinity race a couple days ago was awesome. Great finish. But yeah, the luck had to run out at some point. I'm just happy we got the race in tonight. Weather has been threatening all up and down the East Coast this entire week or so. So the fact that really only one race was significantly hindered by weather, and that was the Xfinity Series race, is honestly, I'd say NASCAR is pretty lucky. You had, an hour delay for the Wednesday night race. You had an hour delay during this race, which sucks, but not as bad as I thought it would be looking at the weather over the course of this week. But there you have it. That's really all I have to talk about in this video. Again, I probably missed a couple important details. If I did, I'll come back and make a video on it here earlier this week. We have a lot of racing here the next couple days. There's an Xfinity race today, a Truck Series race. The trucks make their return. Thank goodness. I'm excited for that. Tuesday night, tomorrow night, or whenever you're watching this. And then the Cup, of course, is back Wednesday. So So much racing, so little time to make these videos, but I will find a way to make sure I cover all the important details. Thank you all for watching this video. I appreciate y'all staying up with me. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, subscribe if you're new, and a big thank you as always to my amazing Patreon supporters. Could not keep doing this show without all of your support, so thank you all for your continued support during these uncertain times. It's great to have racing back. I wish I could be back at the racetrack sometime soon and continue to do the things that I do, but I still greatly appreciate your support during these uncertain times. It really means a lot to me. Like I said, might have a video up tomorrow. I'll have a video before Wednesday, that is for sure, but on what topics, that remains to be seen. But yeah, thanks for watching. Leave a comment, all that great stuff. I will see y'all again very, very soon. Take care, y'all.